Yo, Brandon Beane, give the New Orleans Saints a call. They got a bunch of players I'd love to trade for. Locked on Bills starts now.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Locked On Bills is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Well, folks, welcome in. It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control our discussion. And we got a bunch to get to. We'll discuss the Bills opening Maxwell Hairston's 21-day practice window. We'll talk about some missteps by Brandon Beane, and we'll talk trade targets, which is what we will lead our conversation with. And this question comes from Andrew. Andrew says, who would be your top 5 trade targets for the Bills to improve their roster before the trade deadline? Which of these 5 would be your top 2 priorities? It's a fun question, and the trade deadline is November 4th, so it's coming, right? It's kind of gradually getting here. And obviously you got to have some teams that are willing to admit that it's time to sell. And I think we're probably getting close to that. And I think you'll get some activity here in the coming weeks. So who would be my top 5 trade targets? And this isn't predictive. Some of this is realistic, but this is my preferences. So 5 realistic trade options for the Bills. Budda Baker. Budda Baker with the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know if they would give him away or not, but I love Budda Baker. He's a safety, which is clearly a position that the Bills could use some help, and he's just so fun to watch. He's an impact guy. It's not always easy to watch a TV copy of a game and feel a safety. Boy, you feel Budda Baker on every play. He's fast, he's physical, he's instinctive. I love him. I'd love to have him. So that would be high on my list. I don't know if Arizona's going to do that, though. They signed a bunch of players to their defense. Now they're 2-5. The rest of their division's 5-2. I think they got to be honest about where they're at. So he'd be a dream for me to get Budda Baker. Another safety I'd like, Quandre Diggs with the Tennessee Titans. Veteran, 32 years old on a 1-year deal. I think he can come in and help this safety situation. But then I'd call the Saints, and the Saints have 3 players I'd love to go get. Chris Olave at wide receiver would be high on my list. He's an outstanding vertical threat. He's a guy that can beat man coverage with route running, kind of exactly what the Bills need. He's young. He'd probably be expensive to sign long-term, but you'd have him this year and next year at a minimum. I think he solves a lot of your problems against man coverage and with verticality in your passing game. I love his running mate, Rashid Shaheed. Now, he's not quite as polished of a receiver, but he's still extremely explosive and has verticality to his game. But what you get with Rashid Shaheed is a return guy, punt and kick return. So this guy could come in and check a lot of boxes for you. So I'd love that. He probably costs you a little less than what it would take to give up to get Chris Olave. And then the Saints have another player that I'd be interested in, and that's Demario Davis at linebacker. Now, look, he's an older player. He's 36 years old, but you want to talk about a downhill player? This guy is a dude. I mean, he's maybe over the last 10 years, he might be the best downhill linebacker the league's seen. And no, he's not going to come in and be an amazing coverage player. I think he can hold his head above water. But what he can give you as a downhill player is really meaningful. And I'm thinking about winning games in January and potentially having to face a team like the Colts and what they're going to have with Jonathan Taylor. The Chiefs, right? They've been able to get physical and run the ball at the Bills a little bit. I mean, this is where you're at. This is the league. You got to be able to stop the run. And I think Demario Davis would be huge. Now, I don't think the Bills will trade for Demario Davis. I don't think they'll trade for Budda Baker. I'm not sure they trade for Quandre Diggs. So predictably, I think it's most likely that the Bills would trade for a receiver. And I think that makes a lot of sense. You got problems at receiver right now. Teams are continuing to play man coverage, and you can't make them pay. Teams are continuing to not give you split safeties, and you can't make them pay. All right, loud and clear. You got to do something here. And so that's what I would be after. I don't think you can fix everything on defense right now. And the reality with defense is you're getting players back. You're getting Ogunjobi and Hoyt. Hairston's, going to be coming back. You might be able to swap out Taylor Rapp for Jordan Poyer. You got some pathways defensively. You'll get Matt Milano back. Who knows for how long? But you have some opportunities defensively to get some players back. Offensively, you've been at full strength. And I think adding a receiver like Olave or Shaheed would be the best thing you could do to help your team. I acknowledge, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, the Bills have bigger needs on defense than they do on offense, but I think the best thing you can do to help your defense is to be better on offense, because I think that defense is so game script dependent. I think you got to prioritize right now, like, how do you realistically help your team? I think it's becoming more dynamic on offense. The follow-up was, who would be my top two priorities? Well, I think either of the Saints receivers, but give me a Saints receiver and Budda Baker as my dream. All right, Jonathan says, can you talk about the potential of the Bills trading for A.J. Brown? Watching Josh run around like crazy against the Falcons with seemingly no one to throw to has me interested, but honestly, I don't know enough about him as a player, the potential salary cap implications, the draft capital it would cost to get him, or if Philly is even remotely interested in dealing him to have an informed opinion. Interested in your thoughts, and go Bills. Well, who wouldn't want A.J. Brown, right? He's awesome. He's a good football player. I think it's a very challenging player for the Eagles to part with. The contract there is not really tradable for them. They would trade him. If they were to trade him, they would accumulate $16 million in dead cap this year and $43.5 million next year. I just don't think they do that. And look, I know things can be dicey with the Eagles, right? They have a lot of personality. Their coach has a lot of personality, but this has been like a every year thing. A.J. Brown looks goofy. Jalen Hurts looks like he can't play. Defensively, they have questions, and then they just figure it out. So I think this is just part of the normal Eagles journey of a season. So I don't think they'll trade him. And boy, if they do trade him, please don't let it be to the Patriots. Vrabel obviously is familiar with him. The Patriots have cap space and draft capital and a need at receiver. So I think that the Eagles are going to stick with him. But if they do, let's just hope it's not to the Patriots, obviously. All right, we got more to get to, but I would like to remind you real quick, I'll be part of an event this weekend. The Bills are in Charlotte to play the Carolina Panthers. I live in Charlotte, and I'm excited to be part of an event on Saturday, October 25th at 1 o'clock. It's at the Waxhaw Tap House. We're having a day before takeover event. We're just hanging out. Me, you, let's do it. Bills Mafia hangout in Charlotte at the Waxhaw Tap House. There'll be food, games, entertainment, giveaways. It's a great venue. You can bring your kids. I'm bringing my 5-year-old. We'd just love to meet you. Love to say hello. Love to just hang out and be part of, the Bills Mafia community and the Bills Mafia that is coming to the Charlotte area. I know it's going to be quite the scene. So come be part of this. I'll be doing a live Q&A, but mostly just want to hang out, maybe play a little cornhole, have a beverage, and hang out with Bills Mafia. So come be part of it. October 25th, 1 o'clock Eastern time, Waxhaw Tap House. For more information, go to thejoemarino.com. And we do kindly ask that if you're going to come, that you RSVP. Ultimately, it comes down to this. We want to make sure that the venue can be prepared, right, with as much staff as necessary for the event. So let us know that you're coming by RSVPing at thejoemarino.com. That way we can make sure that it's staffed appropriately. Again, thejoemarino.com. Type that into your browser, or you can go to today's show notes and click on the link that will take you directly there. All right, coming up next, some good questions about the offense and, what's Joe Brady doing, and also some evaluation on Brandon Beane and maybe some of the missteps along the way. So we'll do that here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing like being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it is frustrating. And that's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the Gametime guarantee. You're always going to get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. What I love about the app is that you can see your exact view from your seat before buying. That's a big part for me. I want to know what I'm getting into. I want to make sure that, I'm in a spot where I like the view, that there's, minimal things in front of me, all that stuff. So I really value that opportunity to see that exact seat view before I purchase. And honestly, it's just faster, it's cheaper, and it's less stressful than any other way that I purchase tickets. So download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL. That'll get you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. All right, folks, welcome back. The next one comes from Frederick, who says, I fully agreed with your 9 steps to fix the Bills. My question is, why do you think the offense has gotten away from their bread and butter, big people stuff, as well as the continued overuse and forcing the ball to Keon Coleman? You mentioned they might be trying to justify the pick, and that's probably right. Do you think it's Josh as a quarterback trying to throw his weight around as far as what the offense does? It appears that he might, at least from time to time, get bored with the short passing game and feel the need to show that he's still Josh Allen, cannon-armed gunslinger. They don't have the wide receiver talent for Josh to do that currently. Do you think that they are staring at him, though he would never admit it publicly? No, I don't know if I totally agree with that. I think Josh wants to make dynamic plays like any quarterback wants to, but I think the maturity that Josh has shown over the last couple of years tells me that that's not necessarily it. This is what I'll say, and I've gotten several questions this week about Brady and, hey, what you're saying seems so obvious. Why is he getting away from it? I think it comes down to this. Joe Brady, when he is game planning and executing a game plan and calling plays, I think he has goals. And those goals need to be more married to what the defense is doing and how to attack it, and less about him trying to accomplish certain things offensively. I do believe that there are times in a game where Joe Brady says, it's time for us to do X. And X could mean throw the ball to Keon Coleman. It's whether that's get into some of our motion 4 strong stuff, or hey, this is a Ray Davis drive, or this is a, we're going to dial up a shot drive, right? I think it's a little bit more, hey, these are the things that we want to do, and then you just kind of do it, as opposed to, hey, this is what the defense is actually doing. This is how our team is optimized to attack that defense, and doing those things. I think that's what it comes down to. He's just got to do what's optimal for his offense against that defense, as opposed to, he even said a couple weeks ago, and it really stood out to me. He said, look, we only get about 8 drives a game. Okay, well, to me, that was aligning with my suspicion that he has goals, and it's like, all right, we only get 8 drives, so if we're going to feature Shakir, it has to come at some point, or Kincaid at some point. No, dude, just figure out what they have, what you have, and the best way to attack it, and do that. Now, I will say this, over the last 2 weeks where I've at least been the most frustrated in the offense, and surely you are too. I mean, they gave up 23 points. The Patriots scored 23 points. The Falcons scored 24. The Bills lost both games, by 2 scores? Kind of goofy, right? 23 and 24 should be enough points for this Bills offense to be able to top that and win a football game. But when you go into how those games started, I think what it came down to is the Bills kind of chased it a little bit. Go to the New England game. The first drive, they have the ball, they're moving it well, and they fumble, right? It's the Dawson Knox play. They fumble. Then they had a plan that, hey, whenever there's a sudden change, we're going to run a flea flicker. Joe Brady said it out loud. He told us that in his press conference. And so they get a takeaway, and they dial up the flea flicker, and it actually works. I mean, not necessarily exactly how they intended, but they get 23 yards on the play. And then after that, you have a penalty. It's 2nd and long, then 2 incomplete passes to guess who? Keon Coleman, and you punt from the 42. Your third drive, what's the first play? You throw the ball to Keon Coleman, and he fumbles. The next 2 drives, you're behind the sticks due to penalties, and the next thing you know, it's 20-10, and you're chasing the script. I think it just got away from him a little bit. Against Atlanta, you score a touchdown in the first drive. That's awesome. We love it. Then you answer 2 Falcons touchdowns with 2 punts. You're down 21-7. The next thing you know, you're chasing the script. And you don't have to. You don't have to do that. I think the Bills have shown time and time again this year that their best drives are when they're using their big people and they're two-dimensional throughout the entire process, right? You don't have, if you're down 2 scores, like, that doesn't mean it has to become an 11 personnel air it out game. That's not what has to happen. And I think that's where Joe Brady falls into some traps from time to time, or at least over the last 2 games. I'm excited to see what happens coming out of the bye. Jillian says, I had a thought, and I'm curious for your take on it. Last year, we considered the roster to be in a reset, with the Diggs dead money and cutting ties with older players who had made up the core of what the team was. It has been said that winning the 2 seed and getting the AFC Championship game was that roster overachieving expectations. Are we still very much in a roster reset that we may see some sort of regression we expected last year to play out? Obviously, the rookies being hurt doesn't help, but this roster is seemingly trying to find its new core despite paying players in the offseason, as they have been disappointing thus far. I think to some extent there's some truth to that. You know, maybe they did overachieve a little bit last year, and that obviously calibrates our expectations to be maybe a little different than what reality is. But what I would say about that is ultimately I think they need more to show for the 2024 draft. You look at those first 4 picks: Keon Coleman, Cole Bishop, Dwayne Carter, Ray Davis. You're just not getting what you need out of those players. Coleman is not an impact weapon for this passing game. Cole Bishop is very much learning on the fly here as a second-round pick, a second-year player. Dwayne Carter is not helping the team right now because he's on injured reserve. And, oh, by the way, you've had issues at defensive tackle. Ray Davis is an afterthought in this offense right now. So if those players were closer to what they're supposed to be, or maybe one of them was really awesome, maybe you feel a little bit differently. So I tend to agree that there's some truth to what you're saying, but I do look at that 2024 class as the foundational class as part of your transition year, and you're just not getting anywhere close to what you need out of that group. And so that's what weighs heavily on my mind when we consider this angle. Paul says, I keep hearing that this roster is not good enough, and Brandon Beane has been living off the Josh Allen pick. Do you think that's true? Has Brandon Beane not given this team enough weapons to be successful? Well, ultimately, the Bills haven't won the Super Bowl, right? So whether that's pointing the finger at Brandon Beane and saying you haven't supplied the players, or that's pointing the finger at Sean McDermott and saying you haven't coached well enough, ultimately, I guess it's all true, right? It's all true until it's not. They've been close. I think the team has had the capacity to win it all. They haven't. I think there's been some personnel miscalculations that have made it hard to do the whole thing. So, yeah, until they win it all, whoever has criticism for Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, you are correct. I think ultimately Brandon Beane's resume with the Bills has not been really different than a lot of very good general managers. The most important thing a general manager has to do is find a quarterback. Okay, mission accomplished. And I know that you need more than that, but okay, can we just pause and give him a lot of credit for that? And it wasn't like the Bills had the number 1 pick and they got Josh Allen. They're picking in the 20s, and they orchestrated multiple trades up to get Josh Allen at number 7. That's masterful work. Now, is that hiding some other things? Yeah, to some extent, because they haven't won the Super Bowl with maybe the best quarterback in the league right now, or the best player in the league right now. I think what has hurt Brandon Beane more than anything has that his big swings have blown up in his face. Look at Stefon Diggs, and obviously that was great for 4 years. But they signed him to a 4-year, $96 million contract extension. And then he never played a snap on it, right? He got traded to the Texans. That blew up in his face. And that's a problem. That's a problem because that's your number one playmaker for Josh Allen. That's your number one playmaker. And you weren't sitting around thinking about how you're going to find that guy. You had him signed 4 years, $96 million. You were years away from having to figure that out. Years away. You give Von Miller 6 years, $120 million. He tears his ACL 10 games into it. Trey White, you give him a market reset contract. He's hurt the whole time. Matt Milano, you give him a healthy contract for a linebacker. He's hurt the whole time. So I think some of the more aggressive things that Beane has done have blown up in his face. And then you measure that against the opportunity cost. Well, what if you weren't giving 6 years, $120 million to Von Miller, and you could give it to other players? Or same thing with Trey White or Matt Milano. So not only do you not have the lead pass rusher or the number one playmaker or the number one corner or the playmaking linebacker, you've committed to having those things and you don't have them. I think that's what it's more about. It's not about Kyrie Elam as much as it is that to me. It's not about Boogie Basham as much as it is that to me. I think Beane's had a normal amount of, like good day 2 picks. I think he's had some really good day 3 picks. But the missing star power to go with Josh Allen to me is tied up in the moves that he tried to make to have that have blown up in his face due to injuries or, Stefon Diggs, for whatever reason, didn't want to be in Buffalo anymore. So I think that's what it comes down to. And I think it's pretty unfortunate because you might look at all of those players and think, wow, those guys, if they're doing what they're capable of doing, if they're doing the things that got them paid, boy, this team would be in good shape. But they did those things. Beane paid them. And then, 3 of them got hurt. And one of them said, I don't want to be there anymore for whatever reason. So I think that's what it comes down to. And I feel bad because I think those are things that you just can't anticipate. That's not part of the formula. And I think that's what the biggest problem has been more than anything. Some nice free agent moves. I mean, there's been a lot of good. But those big swings, the biggest swings he's made to have star power around Josh Allen have blown up in his face. And I think that's more than anything what it comes down to. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about the return of Maxwell Hairston and a couple other good herd mentality items. Folks, be sure to stick with me. The NFL season is here as FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss right now. New customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put $5 down, and if it hits, you're going to unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, I've tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. It just makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action. So whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Welcome back, folks. The next one today comes from Charlie, who says, how can the Bills improve spacing in the secondary, especially the safeties? Nate Tice noted that we're getting to the ball several yards later than we usually have. Anything scheme-wise that can help these players currently on the struggle bus? Yeah, I mean, this is kind of tied to all of the frustrations I've been sharing all year. It's a very disconnected defense with their coverage. And their spot drop they're spot dropping and they're just getting to landmarks and they're not playing with vision or instincts and they're slow to trigger. And, it's the second and third level. I mean, you talk about the linebackers and the safeties. It's just as loose as I've ever seen. And it's all these players. It's Terrell Bernard, it's Taylor Rapp, it's Cole Bishop, and that affects the corners. And Trey White obviously has his limitations. And so these guys are so hyper-focused on not giving up the big play, and they're just not driving and closing on routes like they need to. And there's a lot of free access and space. I think it comes down to being more cohesive together, playing with more vision and instincts and feel together. And we got to see it. We got to see that happen. And I think there's some limitations. I think Taylor Rapp and Trey White are limited players they're hurting you because of that. But also the whole group is just not playing with good vision, instincts, or feel. Fish says, Joe, when is it time for a coordinator to move down to the field, in your opinion? I get the advantageous viewpoint of being up top, but rely on your assistants upstairs for those informational pieces and get a real feel for the game. This is in regards to both sides of the ball. I think this is really preferential stuff. The benefits to being in the booth are pretty obvious. You get the best view of the game. You can be really organized. You have a counter in front of you that you can put out papers and, just be in a zone and be in a rhythm. And instead of having to ask a question, you're seeing it yourself. You're seeing the coverage rotations and, how they're leveraging certain things. And that should put you in the optimal position to call the best plays. The downside is that you don't get to be on the sideline with your players and get into that emotion and feel of the game. And maybe to some extent that's a good thing. So I think it's about being what's right for your team at the moment, but also you got to be in the spot that's best for you as a play caller to call the best game. I think I'd want to be in the booth, to be honest with you. I'd want to see it for myself. I want to have a feel. I wouldn't want to have to ask somebody else and then tell me. I want to see it for myself, but that's all preferential. Khan says, what's your opinion on the dynamic kickoff? Is it positively or negatively affecting the Bills' field position based on who's returning? And how has the kick coverage looked thus far? Is it easier or harder to tackle returns now than when the kickoffs were like before? I've enjoyed it. I couldn't find like a data set that would, I believe, to be true about like what the average field position is after a kickoff. There's been one kick return touchdown so far this year. I think it's a fun, meaningful play. And unfortunately, this is kind of what had to happen because teams weren't going to deal with kick returns if they didn't have to, right? Going back to kickoffs and a touchback being at the 20, I mean, who wouldn't want that every single time, right? We'd kill for that now. And so I think you make it a more competitive play. There's been more returns. I think they've achieved their desired outcome. I think they're fun to watch. I'll be mad about it when the Bills give up a play that it costs them. Fortunately, so far that hasn't happened, but I've enjoyed it. I really have. I think it's made kick returns more interesting. And, I think ultimately, whatever the rules are, figure out a way to be good at it and for it to be an advantage for you. And so, all 32 teams are dealing with the same rules. Get the right players, get the right coaching, get the right schemes together and be good at it and make it a strength. All right, real quick, I want to touch on Max Hairston and some of the reinforcements coming back for this defense. The Bills announced earlier this week that they would be opening the 21-day practice window for Maxwell Hairston to return from injured reserve. So the Bills now have 21 days to have Maxwell Hairston practice. At any point within this 21 days, they can activate him to the roster, but he obviously can't play in a game until he's activated. So they have this window now to kind of feel things out and make sure he's ready to help this football team. And so one thing that's kind of been on my mind is that there is a lot of football left. The Bills have played 6 games. That means there's 11 more regular season games. And so I think the timeline could play out like this, where Maxwell Hairston is practicing, and then you put him back on the field week 10 against Miami, where, he kind of sprinkles in with Tre'Davious White. And then that just ramps up every week. So you got week 11 against Tampa, week 12 against Houston. Maybe you take those 3 games and they're a platoon that, if it goes well, starts to favor more of Hairston. And then I think by week 13, this is your starting corner opposite of Christian Benford. and you have Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, New England, Cleveland, Philly, the Jets. That's 6 regular season games to get him optimized to help you in the playoffs. I think you have a real opportunity for this to be salvaged, if you will, this year. So I'm excited for this to ramp up. And obviously, I want it to be successful. And this is a huge opportunity for the Bills to get a player that can elevate a spot where they need it. And so you layer that with Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi set to return this week and kind of get excited about some of the pieces coming back on defense. So a couple of other transactions here. The Bills released cornerback Jalen Kimber from the practice squad. They also released Jimmy Charlo from the active roster, and he's since been put back on the practice squad. He cleared waivers. Now he's back on the practice squad. So that takes care of 2 of your roster spots with Hoyt and Ogunjobi back. You still have 1 open spot, and while I think you could say, well, maybe that'll be Maxwell Hairston, I think that's more down the line. And I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Poyer gets signed to the active roster here in the coming days. And that's how you get to 53. So right now the Bills have 50 players on their roster. Hoyt and Ogunjobi is 51 and 52. And then you have 1 spot open. I think it's going to be Poyer. And then if you do that with Poyer, that opens a spot in your practice squad for Gabe Davis. If Gabe Davis is healthy now, right? He hasn't practiced yet. Davis has been injured. He's on the practice squad injured reserve. And you can only have 6 veteran spots on your practice squad. So if you get Poyer on the 53, there's your spot for a veteran on your practice squad, which I think could be Gabe Davis. So I know that, look, it's the year 2025 and Gabe Davis and Jordan Poyer aren't really that exciting, but have you watched Taylor Rapp? I don't know. Jordan Poyer suddenly sounds very exciting to me. The Bills need help at wide receiver. Gabe Davis is still young and he's had production with Josh Allen. So that sounds interesting to me, all things considered. And obviously the thing that's most interesting to me is Maxwell Hairston and the skill set that he has and how he can really help this team at corner because, Trey White is doing his best, but he's just very limited. All right, folks, that's it for today. We're going to turn our attention the rest of this week to the Carolina Panthers. So we'll have crossover Thursday. On Thursday, then we'll do the full primer. We'll do final thoughts on Saturday. The next thing you know, we'll be watching the Bills at Bank of America Stadium, searching for that 5th win of the season. All right, that's going to do it for us here today, folks. Thanks for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.